2. Sea journey. At last a great day arrived. Charles discovered that his quarters for the journey were to be a large open cabin in which there were 20 hammocks for the single young men. But Charles did not take long to become acquainted with the other youths, some of whom, like William Hazard, were to become close and lifelong friends. One of the young men in his cabin was Robert Smith, filled in the slow hours aboard the ship by writing a long letter to his father in England. We were towed out of the East India docks on Saturday the 1st about 9 a.m. amidst the great cheering from a concourse of people who had assembled to witness the departure. We went smoothly down the Thames, and although the day was rather dull and threatening rain, yet we had a beautiful view of the surrounding scenery as we passed. We arrived at Gravesend, cast anchor, there to undergo the inspection of the Government Commission agents. We lined up on the poop and had to pass one by one showing our contract tickets, which constituted the government inspection of the passengers. The ship had to undergo a search by these gentlemen, and as there was a great deal of luggage lying in among the tables and seats in a topsy-turvy fashion, they concluded that she had too much cargo on board, and that some of it must come off and be sent by another vessel. This created a great deal of discontent among the passengers, as everyone was afraid of losing some of their luggage for a time. However, it was getting dark and nothing could be done that night, so we amused ourselves a little with music of various kinds until bedtime, and then retired for the night. About 7 a.m. I was awakened by the noise of passengers running to and fro, shouting in tall tones about their luggage as the lighter was alongside, and the men of the ship were already actively putting off some of the cargo. While this was going on, I went to breakfast, and at 11 a.m. went to the divine service, which was well attended, featuring a very good sermon. I could scarcely realize that it was the Sabbath. Seeing some collected in a group in the part of the ship praising God, and another part of the ship men busy discharging cargo in a very unbecoming manner, tearing and swearing at their work, and you may guess what sort of Sabbath we had for the first, very different from what you see in Scotland, but it appears to concord with the feelings of the English. I judge they can be praying very earnestly at one time, and immediately after singing and whistling all of the various tunes in existence. I almost forgot. We had vendors of apples and nuts from Gravesend pressing the passengers to purchase from them, and I have no doubt they did a good stroke of business, although it was Sunday. However the day was spent, in the evening we formed into groups singing hymns and church music, and then went to bed. I slept tolerably well, getting up the next morning, Monday, at 7 a.m. After a wash and a stroll on the deck, there was breakfast. Then orders were given out that we would get our weekly rations served out after breakfast, which caused a great hubbub. You must first know that there are two different kinds of passengers, namely 200 nonconformists, and the others composed of any person sent by the shipbrokers to fill up. Consequently, we had two scales of rations, one inferior to the other. The ship was going to serve us all on the inferior scale, which we resented. Fortunately, the government agent was on board the second time, so 10 of us went to him and presented our contract tickets and ventilated our grievances. He immediately gave orders that we were to get no less than what was on our tickets, whatever more. So we all had to show our tickets before we got our rations. Consequently, we were fed at one pitch, while the other party were fed at one much less. However, we got matters corrected and spent the rest of the day feeling rather idle and discontented, everyone complaining at being so long and anxiously inquiring when we were going to start. Many reports were made, some that we were going to start immediately, some that we were going to start 2 or 3 days hence, while others were that the ship was condemned and that we would be required to go back to London and join another. However, we were a little pacified when we were informed by the mate that we would start early next morning. At that stage, everyone drew towards this evening's amusement of various sorts, Music was struck up and dancing was entered into with great spirits. Gradually they retired to the rest, and by 10 o'clock most of them were in the arms of Morpheus. I myself remained on deck till near 12 o'clock, then went to bed and slept well till 6 a.m. When I was awakened by the tremendous cheering of those who had got up before me, I hurried on along with many others in shirt and trousers to join the crowd in cheering, and as we were actually leaving the place, which ceded to release to our detention of 3 days and 3 nights, the tug came alongside, lines were made fast, and the impatient paddles, after hesitating a splash or two, moved steadily on. The 3 days' familiarised scenery gradually glided away. We were no sooner off than we were proceeding with moderate speed down the long avenue of ships stretching towards the sea. Looking around us as we ploughed the centre of the river with a fine view we obtained of the surrounding scenery. Although the country on both sides was fairly flat and comparatively uninteresting, it was not without charm, however, and very fitting for the English landscape. Rich alluvial plains on either side stretched far around, and although the river was very wide and the land pretty distant from us, yet we could easily discern fine hedgerows and belts of planting, with here and there an elegant mansion or a snug little farmhouse beautifully studded round with clumps of trees, and on very elevated and prominent part we could see windmills busily at work. The river now grew so wide that we could scarcely discern anything at all. The passengers left off looking at the land, their attention now turned in amusement towards the sailors, who were spreading their sails, singing merrily songs as they did so, which was something new to those who had never been to sea. Our tug was about to leave us, and the darkness was settling in, so the passengers were gradually going below and turning towards the evening's amusement. We had a great deal of music in the evening so far, but tonight a few young men had a meeting for the purpose of forming a class for mutual improvement, and it was decided that we shall have meetings each Tuesday and Friday evening at 7:30 p.m. Our first subject for discussion is to be, who are the heroes of the day? Wednesday, November the 5th. Got up at 6:30 a.m. feeling rather sickly, and learned that we had made no progress during the night. A headwind was still very strong, so they have thought fit to cast anchor. We are lying off Deal, not far from Dover, so we are very near land, and a magnificent place it is. About a mile along the shore is a beautiful white chalk rock, falling almost perpendicularly into the sea, with a lovely rising ground behind and the windmills flying in all directions. The town of Deal lies to the right. Dover is around the corner. We have men coming from Deal in small boats selling apples and gingerbread, nuts and onions at an exorbitant price, and offering to take letters on shore for 6pence each. But we were warned against doing so they would very likely take off the stamp. We had a prayer evening at 6:30 and rang a great many hymns. We also had a meeting for the purpose of electing watchmen to go about all night to see that all the lights were put out at a specified time, and to see that no fire originated anywhere. It was agreed that a married and a single gentleman go together each night, everyone taking their respective nights in succession, which means that the duty will only fall to each one or thereabouts during the voyage. Thursday, November the 6th, 1862. We were again pestered with men from Deal selling new loaves a good deal smaller than those 3D loaves at home, for the sum of 7D. Today, we had a very busy day making dumplings and puddings. It was rather laughable to see a great many unpractised hands all busily employed baking in whatever quiet corner they can find, dough to the elbows and flour all over, and all as earnest as if it were for a wager. Then you can see them all running to the gallery, each with a big bag of flour and raisins to get them cooked for dinner. We, however, considered ourselves aggrieved in some things, for instance, in the matter of coffee. In place of giving us 2 ounces of coffee in a prepared state, they are giving us 2 ounces of raw berries, which then, when roasted and ground, is 1/3 less, and several other things. However, if we don't get an amendment, there will be disturbances amongst us. We had have had dinner, and our dumplings were delightful. Perhaps there is a little partiality because being made by ourselves. Our seamen are again very busy weighing anchor and spreading sail, preparatory to starting. In the midst of the bustle, the John Duncan, a vessel that lay close to us in the East India docks, passed us about 50 yards distance, bound for Otago with 500 passengers on board. We have 365 on board our ship. You may guess we were a little cheered, but had some reason to murmur when we saw a ship that was 2 days later in sailing pass us briskly, and us standing still and idled as a painted ship on a painted ocean. We got round the cliffs of Dover when the breeze freshened and became more favourable, giving us a speed of 8 knots. It was dark when we passed over, so that I cannot give you any description of it, only we could see rows of lights among the sea coast and the rising ground behind studded all over with a whole host of lights, which was altogether a charming scene. We could also see on the opposite side a few lights, which were at Calais, but too far away to distinguish anything but the signal lights. We had our usual time dancing, then retired to bed to sleep away the time and wait the results for another day. Friday, November the 7th, 1862. There was a great hubbub on board as it was found that we had a little stowaway on board. Everyone was anxious to see the little urchin, which caused some great crowding in different parts of the ship. There was also a matter of an Irishman on board whose passage had been paid by his brother in New Zealand, but through some default or other had not received a contract ticket. Consequently, the captain ordered him to go on shore. Both went ashore with a pilot at midday when we were off to the Isle of Wight. A fresh breeze was blowing, and in the evening we had a meeting with our mutual improvement class, which saw some very able discussion. We had 2 meetings in the afternoon, one for the purpose of forming a music class, as we have a professor on music on board, with whom 18 of us have brought music books at a shilling each, and we get taught free on a Monday, Wednesday and Friday evenings. The other meeting was for the purpose of having an Atmure social concert once a week, and I had been elected president of the committee for this. By this time the ship was beginning to roll very much, and as we had not yet got our sea legs, it was rather laughable to see those trying to walk gripping whatever came within their reach. Matters were still getting worse as most of us were gripping our way towards the hammocks. There were 20 in our berth and all sick but one. It was a terrible storm and the ship was rolling tremendously. Persons could not stand without having a firm hold of something fast, nor could they sit or lie without a firm hold. Casks, pig pens and dog houses were knocked loose and sent flying. I and a few other young men were stuck upon some large casks that were firmly tied under the quarter-deck, witnessing the dreadful scenes and expecting every roll of the ship to be the last. The sea was breaking over at intervals, making altogether a horrid spectacle. A large box came skipping across, smashing the poop steps and big cart of the cabin front. Two of the sails were torn to rags. There was scarce a female face to be seen and only a few males. All were so ill they could not get out of their berths. In fact, they did not come out until the mate and the doctor compelled them to do so. Monday evening, when the weather was moderated, a great deal of the water came through the decks onto the bunks, some of them being saturated, but fortunately mine was comparatively dry. The experience was totally different of the few days previous, and something that none of us had expected. Perhaps you may think that I've exaggerated a little on this experience, but I should have very little interest in doing so. In fact, I wish you to understand that I have had to sit down innumerable times and risen as often, feeling it impossible to write. On the same table we have some baking and some mending chests and some doing a bit of tinkering amongst our tinware, as if the picturing of the ship has made a few wrinkles in most of them. So among all of this turmoil and the rolling of the ship, you may guess what sort of convenience we have for writing. Friday, November the 14th, 1862. Have been busy today baking, as all this falls to be my week of being captain of the mess. There are 10 of us in our mess, each taking week about being captain, who has an assistant. The captain's duty is to bake, carve the meat, and divide all of the other sundries, while the assistant carries all the food to and from the gallery, assists in washing dishes. So I have been fortunate enough in having the sick week, which is not very pleasant for a sick person. In the evenings, we had our mutual improvement class, the subject being New Zealand, its comforts and capabilities, which was very freely discussed for an hour. I went on to the poop, where I remained until about 11 p.m. I was very much interested in the strange appearance on the surface of the water. All around the vessel seemed to be a mass of fires, sending forth sparks in all directions as if it were at war with us. Saturday, November the 15th, 1862. When I got up this morning, I felt all right again. A ship was in sight right ahead of us. Spoke to her about midday, found she was from Liverpool, bound for Calcutta. They speak by hoisting various kinds of flags, which I do not fully understand, therefore won't attempt to describe. Sunday, November the 16th, 1862. Got up pretty early, and as the weather had improved, all seemed anxious to have a more cleanly appearance than usual, no doubt on account of their expecting to attend divine service, which took place at 10:30. The Reverend delivered a very appropriate discourse from the St. John's Gospel. Distance run since noon of the previous day, 196 miles. Wednesday, November the 19th. Today has been remarkably warm, fully as warm as the hottest day ever I felt at home, and so calm that I believe we were not going as fast as a donkey and a cart. While the passengers were spread out all over the ship, apparently enjoying the heat of the day, for my part, I preferred being in the shade with a goldsmith in my hands to assist in my whiling away the tedious hours, for I can't help saying that they are tedious. No matter what you set your mind to or what you endeavour to study, you are always disturbed in some way or other by some who have nothing else to do. I assisted in throwing overboard one of the cows and a couple of pigs that died through the effect of the storm previously referred to. It being my night to go and watch instead of going to bed, I was left to pace the deck alone all night, conscious of the blissful snoring of my friends. In the evening I had a great time fiddling on the poop while the cabin passengers were dancing, which was carried on till a late hour. We have not got our position these last 2 days, the progress being too small to record. Very warm, was obliged to put off my flannels and put on lighter clothing. We had some good sport today, the boxing gloves being introduced, besides leapfrog, high jumping and various other amusements. We have had a good deal of confusion and noise regarding the sanitary condition of the ship in certain quarters. Consequently, we had a meeting and passed resolutions for betterment in this respect. I now want you to understand that it is very difficult for me to describe one day from another. They are all so much alike. Every morning has the same appearance, nothing but water to be seen all around. And the next chapter is the new country, and I'll start that shortly.